So I used to feel parts of me switch, and I had absolutely no control over them. And there was times in my life where I would lose hours, or I could possibly lose days, and I would black out, and I would not remember anything that had gone on in those periods of time. Most of my life up until 2019 was very much numb, and I have very little recollection of things that I've done in my past. However, when I started working with the parts of me, which we can call different personalities, massive things have happened, and now I don't switch, and now I don't have DID, and all of the parts inside of me feel really safe and secure. And what I'd love to share with you in this video is how I've gone about it, how I taught myself. And I'm not saying this is the cure for DID, but I'd love to take you on a journey of what it's been like for me. So let's look at what DID is. It's something you do when you disassociate. But what is happening when you're disassociating is you feel like you're floating above your body, and you feel like it's not really happening to you, and you're a third person in the room. And what's happening at that point is you've actually gone inside of your body deeply to protect yourself. And it's when you go inside of your body that these parts of you can be created. I personally know the times that I've had trauma and when these parts of me have been created. And what is happening when you don't have any of your childhood memories is that parts of you do remember your childhood. When you start working with these parts, that's when you can start to recover some of your childhood, and you can recover some of those memories. So I want you to know that any time you have disassociated, it is entirely possible that there is a part of you that was created then that maybe, just maybe, is stuck back there, because that's what was true for me. My trauma, most of it, was created for two different paths, two different reasons. So a lot of my trauma was created by my dad. Between the ages of 0 and 9, there was things that my dad did to me that no man should ever do to a child. And there was also things that 5 other men did to me before the age of 11. And a lot of my alters and a lot of my younger parts were created due to that trauma. But I was also part of something known as Project Monarch. I have clear recollection and clear memories of being part of the government trials and the government tests, and I can recall specific places that I've been, and I know what these people have done to me because I was part of the Gifted and Talented programme. I've been primarily working a lot with my Project Monarch alters and also the alters from my trauma. And whilst Project Monarch is incredibly an awful, terrible experience, it's something people don't tend to remember until they're later on in life. But upon working with the alters that were created as part of Project Monarch, I've been able to retrieve and recover the memories. This video isn't just about DID. It's also about parts of you. Because any time you experience trauma, which is defined as a moment when something was not enough or something was too much, it's entirely possible you have a part of you. And I personally help clients now, as someone that has recovered from DID, actually help themselves heal. So let's say you lost your mum when you were 31. It's entirely possible that that part of you is trapped back then, back at that time, back in that moment. Because that's what's been true for me with all the parts work that I've done. And what I've done is I've learned to build a relationship with every single part. And I started off in 2012, I didn't know this at the time until I watched Manchurian Candidate. In 2025, I had a chip removed from my head at the back here, and I can still feel the bump where the chip used to be, and I'll pop you a picture just up there. And people who have been part of Project Monarch, you have this little tiny rubber chip placed inside of you, and it allows them to control you. It allows them to switch your personalities. And not many people speak about this, but I didn't really realise that that's what was causing all of my personalities to switch and all of my alters to come online until chips started to be removed. But what I can say is from the moment that my chip was removed, I really started noticing that the switching was just nothing that I could control whatsoever. And I started losing days, sometimes weeks of my life. But I was still functioning as a person. But then it wasn't until 2016 that really and truly my younger parts really started to come forward and life was very difficult for me. So it was upon meeting my father again in 2016, and he said his code activating keyword to me. And what happened was he unlocked the altar inside of me that I will call Little Kelly. And my dad used to say and whisper words into my ear that would cause me, this personality, to come to the front. And it would allow him to do whatever it was that he was doing to me. And then he would whisper a closing word to me. And then that personality would drop back in my head. And then I would come back online. And what I realised was in 2016, Little Kelly was so evident. But I could also feel that there was another younger part of me that we will call our inner child. And my inner child is known as LK. And every single one of you watching this video, you have a beautiful, gorgeous inner child inside of you. And what I found was that Little Kelly was trapping me. And I used to feel so embarrassed and so ashamed. But there were certain things in reality that would trigger me. So let's say I smelt my dad's cologne somewhere, or someone would say one of my dad's code key trigger words, because he had many words he would say to me that would cause me to switch. And what I started noticing, and maybe this is true for people watching this, is that certain keywords would cause Little Kelly to come forward. But then when she dropped back, then another part of me would come and spin and step forward. And what I realised was that actually my system was set up to protect me. So my system has never, ever, ever been trying to hurt me. It's always been trying to protect me. And I want you to know that whenever a protective part of you steps forward, it's doing it because it wants to protect you from something. And this is why I am so passionate about inner child work, because it wasn't until I actually started working with my inner child in 2020 that things massively started to change for me. For many, many years, I have spent my time drinking. I've smoked, I've done things that I'm not particularly proud of as a person. But I had a lot of coping mechanisms. And one of the biggest coping mechanisms was all of my parts were using addictions. They were using different ways, again, to keep me safe. But it was only when I started working with my gorgeous inner child, and I really realised that actually she needed me, what she calls her daddy, to make her feel safe. Because my inner child was just remembering some of the things that had happened to her when she was younger. And she was hiding behind all of my parts. But before I got to her, I had to work with one of her biggest protectors. And that part of me is 17-year-old me, and that part of me is called Nick. But one of the things that I noticed was, as much as I wanted to get access to LK because I could see her, but she was hidden under a table, there was this part of me that was black, and it was protecting me. I could never see his face in the beginning. And I made a commitment to myself because I was an alcoholic up until July 2020. And I said to myself, I am going to do what it takes to get better. But it was on working with him that I really started to notice that actually he just wanted me to show up. And that's what your parts want. A lot of your parts just want you to create consistency. And I want you to remember, consistency creates safety. If you spend loads of time with your inner child or loads of time with these parts of you, your parts learn to trust you. So your parts are doing what they're doing inside your internal family system to keep you safe. A lot of your parts, just like Nick and just like LK, did not understand who I was. So one of the things that I started doing was every single time I went to see Nick, I told him my name and I told him my age. I did exactly the same with my inner child, and I would say to her, hello, my name is Kel, and at the time I would say I was 40 years of age. And I found that actually my parts, these two primarily, they didn't want to talk about my trauma. And then I realised that actually all that time that I spent in talk therapy, and I've seen 13 different counsellors, my mental health file is that thick. I've seen psychiatrists, psychologists, I've seen, you name it, I've seen a person. And I've tried every single form of therapy pretty much out there. But it wasn't until I did the work myself. That's what fundamentally changed everything. And I didn't even know this was called IFS, or your internal family system. I had no idea whatsoever that was what it was called until it was, I think, 2024. And I was like, I've been doing that myself. So a lot of you who do have parts, You will be talking and hearing these voices in your head, but it doesn't make you crazy. There isn't anything wrong with you. These parts are stuck in a moment in time. And the greatest thing your parts want is to feel safe. So what I started doing, and maybe you can too, is I started doing activities with my inner child that made her feel safe. I started watching Disney films. I started talking to her on a really regular basis. I started doing colouring with her. I did puzzles with her. I did things that made her feel really safe and secure and happy. And I used to spend so much time with her. And then I noticed that actually once she started to feel safe and more relaxed, other parts of me started to come forward. And then I met Malcolm in 2022, another part of me. And I did a lot of work with him because there was a huge amount of trauma that happened for him. And then as the years have gone on, what I've noticed is sometimes parts of me have been working as teams, have been working as groups. But again, your parts work together to protect you. So what I did was I started creating what I called my own internal family. I started putting together like a chart of my parts. And I also realised that every part had an identity. Every part of me had a name, it had an age, and it had a point of time, or what I call the POR, point of reference, of when that part of me was created via trauma. And I also realised that parts of me wore different clothes, and I understood that they used different keywords, and they would talk in a different way. And I understood that also parts eat different foods. And I understood that also parts of you sometimes have different health complaints and different health conditions. And that's sometimes why all of a sudden you can, want to dress one way a certain day and in another way completely a different day. Because what happens with your parts, and a lot of you don't realise this, is actually your parts are stepping in front of you. But they're stepping in front of you to keep you safe. And what happens is, let's say you're in a situation with somebody. And this isn't DID, okay? This is parts. But let's say you're in a situation with somebody and you feel like you're being attacked, you feel quite vulnerable. What happens is your inner child feels vulnerable. A protective part of you steps forward, and that part of you's job, which in internal family systems you can call it your firefighter, its job is to get rid of the fire as fast as possible. And that's when you will say things to people that may be hurtful. And eventually you might even shake your head and come back online and go, oh my God, what have I done? And I realised that actually I needed to understand where all these parts of me did and what their role was and what their job was. Because I realised that actually some of my parts were vulnerable. Some of my parts were having a management role. Some of my parts had like a mother role or a father role. And I realised there was a part of me that was responsible for all my finances and all of my accounting decisions. And I did all this myself. I started mapping out my own internal system. And then I realised that actually different parts of me live in different parts of my body. So I would know, for example, that when I had sore shoulders, I would know that that was that part of me. And then I also began to understand that actually all of my trauma and all of my illnesses were actually all caused by my parts. And I was diagnosed with ADHD and MPD and fibromyalgia back in 2016. But what I can genuinely tell you, and again, this is just my experience, I'm not saying it's yours, but all of my illnesses and all of my problems have all been because of my parts. So once I built my inner family, then I started one-to-one work with my parts. I started doing it daily. I started doing it week in, week out, and talking to them and making them feel safe. But what I did with every single part when I met them was I understood who they were, but I didn't ask about the trauma. Because this is where, for me, talk therapy is great to a point. But what I can genuinely tell you is talk therapy was what was terrifying my parts. It was putting my parts into a highly reactive state, which is why I became so very, very ill mentally back in 2016 and 2017. And it was the repeated trauma of talking about the past that my parts didn't want to talk about. Your parts want you to make them feel safe. That's all they're doing. Remember that in this video, if you take nothing from this video, your parts are just trying to keep you safe from memories that they know that you don't know. But once they started feeling safe, I did activities with them again. And I started building, like I say, a structure. And what I found really helpful was I would become like a masculine energy. So I became a dad to a lot of my parts, and I became a mountain, and I became a pillar and a place of support. And what happened was, as my parts started to feel more safe because I was consistently with them, I then set times and I would say, okay, LK, I'm going to work with you at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. on a Sunday. And then I would say to you, Mav, I'm going to work with you at 5 p.m. on a Thursday. I would say to Kelly, I'm going to work with you at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. And I used to have a calendar full of doing different parts work at different times. But what really helped was me being reliable. I made a commitment to my parts. And if you're interested in parts work, when you do start to make those commitments, you are making your parts feel really incredibly safe. And it was only when some of my parts actually felt safe did they actually start to show me the trauma. Did they actually really ask me to take them away from that situation? And what I've done is a lot of work in what we call the quantum field. I've done a lot of revising my timeline. So I've used a lot of timeline therapy with my parts, and I have changed how things have been. And that's why I'm so passionate about what we call reparenting your inner child and reparenting your parts. Because what I've done with every single part of me is I've reparented them. So I've given them what they needed back then now. And now I have one beautiful, gorgeous little happy family deep inside of me. You know, I have my own inner mother. I have my own inner father. I've got some really favourite parts of me. But I've got to say, like, the biggest part of me that I had to heal came from Project Monarch. It came from my super soldier that I'll call Mav. I'll pop you a photo just up there of who Mav is. One of the biggest things that my super soldier needed was he needed me to hold him through every moment. And what I did for Mav was I became his mountain. And I worked with him every single day for 9 months. And I know that Mav also surfaced back in 2016. He was really with me in 2019 and 2020. But I had to make other parts of me feel safe and get them sorted before I could actually work with the super soldier deep inside of me. Because those guys kept trying to protect Mav from everything that he was going through. And I realised that Mav was the part of me that had the biggest amount of depression possible. He was the numbest part of me. So whenever I have been numb in my life, it's always been Mav, the part of me, that has always felt that numbness. And there have been times with him where I've sometimes just sat with him in a room. And that's what I do in my head. I use a lot of imagination. I use a lot of visualisation work. So if you've ever done any of my guided meditations that I've created here on YouTube for people just like yourself, you'll understand I take you to places. And what I did with Mav was I kept taking him to the same place at the same time, day in, day out. And I would just sit and I'd hang with him. Because once you learn to start talking to your parts, then you really start to learn that actually they just want you to hang with them. They want you to treat them like they're just a normal part of you. And when I was talking to him, I would say, like, you know, can you tell me about a time, you know, when things were really bad? And he would give me examples and he would show me things in my head. And I found with Mav that what I really needed to do was relive those memories. Now, I'm not saying that is the correct way to do it. But when it came to working with the part of me that was created mostly from Project Monarch and my time there, he needed me to see all of the things that those people did to me. And I found by actually just being with him in that moment and holding him, and he used to show me stuff on a TV screen. And I did a lot of work with Mav in my dreams as well. And I've done a lot of work with my own parts through lucid dreaming. I'm a massive fan of lucid dreaming, and it really has helped heal some of my parts as well. But the biggest part of Mav was just understanding that he wanted someone to be there. And he felt like he was such a mess up. He felt like he was such a screw up. And he used to be so hard on himself. He beat himself up. But if I tell you 9 months of every single day of working with Mav, he's the favourite part of me. I love the little guy inside of me. He's like a goofball now, you know, and he's a dork and he's just a lovable character inside of me. And he plays with LK, and I'm being serious here. There's nothing wrong with me mentally, but what I have done is I've got a gorgeous inner family inside of me. And even though my parts don't take over me and they don't switch with me anymore, what I always do is I always make sure I check in with my parts. And that's fundamental and that is key. Every single day, years on, I still check in with my inner child every single day. Okay, I'm like, how are you? And I always say when I wake up in the morning and I pull my curtains open, and I say this every time I pull my curtains open, I'm like, I wonder what amazing and incredible and fantastic things are going to happen for me today. And I always say, good morning, parts. Let's start whatever day it is and let's have a brilliant, great day. And I find that journaling, and that yes, there are still memories that come up, but they don't hurt. They're not painful because I've regulated my nervous system. And I've got to be honest here, it's only because I started regulating my nervous system did actually a lot of my parts really start talking to me. I've made a big video here on YouTube, and I'll link it just up there for you, all around soul retrieval work that I did in March this year, where I found other parts of me. And whilst I do have 14 parts of me, there could be more, but I know that if any other parts of me surface, they won't come with trauma. They won't come with massive memories because I know I've done that biggest part of work. I'm not saying parts work is the cure, but what I'm saying is maybe you're seeing this video for a reason. You don't have to be mentally ill. You don't have to have bipolar, schizophrenia, or DID to know that actually you've probably got parts of you trapped in a certain time, back at a certain place. And your parts just want you to feel safe. So parts work for me is about finding someone that can work in the internal family system, or, parts work. And make sure that if you are going to do parts work, yes, you can do it yourself. But if you do have really poor mental health and you really struggle, work with somebody. Check them out. Make sure they're a registered professional, because I'm a registered trauma practitioner. I made this video today because it's a decade since I was actually last sectioned at the end of August. And I know that even though there have been some very, very, very dark times, I know that my parts now all feel safe inside of me. And that's when in 2022, I realised that I'd stumbled on this great gift that I had, where I just knew that I could talk to parts. And that's what I do in sessions with people. I sit with people and I can see your parts. And I know what to say to your parts because I've been you. I know what it's like when you tell me certain things. And I work with clients all over the world now. And I work with people that have got DID. I work with people that have got bipolar. And I work with the general public as well. Like I say, you don't have to have a mental illness to come and do parts work. But I work with people from all walks of life. And nothing gives me greater pleasure than watching a relationship form between a woman and the 11-year-old part of her, or a woman and the 4-year-old part of her. Or I even work with men, and I help them make their inner masculine stronger, and I help them understand 12-year-old them, 16-year-old them, 21-year-old them. Just to end here, you saw this video for a reason. Whatever you do with that, the next bit is up to you. But I hope you found this beneficial, because very few people speak about DID. They speak about whatever's going on, but I've come at it from a healed perspective. And I've only chosen to speak about it because I don't switch and I'm in full control of my parts. I have great self-energy and I am always Kel every single day, 24 hours a day. And my parts feel lovely and safe. My parts feel lovely and secure. And I live the most glorious, beautiful life. So to end, no matter what has happened to you as a child, I truly believe it is possible to heal and recover. But it takes commitment from you. It takes you saying, I will do whatever it takes for me to get better. No, there are so many modalities. There is so much therapy out there for you. But it's actually the parts work that made the biggest amount of difference to my life. And that's why you saw this video today. Anyway, I welcome your comments. Let me know which part of this resonated with you and which part you thought, you know what, I'd love to do that. If you do want to work with me and want to do a session with me, you can either have a free 15-minute chat. Let's come and have a chat. Or come and do a session with me. I get it and I understand it because I was you. Anyway, I hope this helps. Have a great day and I will catch you on the video soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.